I reviewed some great models this year, but some of them sucked. So today we're taking a look at the worst model trains of 2023. There's nothing worse than saving up for an eternity, building up your hopes, spending an absolute fortune, and then receiving a cheaply produced model with no detail and a shoddy, unserviceable mechanism. Well, that's exactly what you get with today's model in 5th place. It is this, the EFE Rail Class J94, which was first released by Dave Jones Models in 2016, making this almost 8 years old now. Nevertheless, Bachmann and Kernow saw fit to bring this model back under the EFE Rail brand with precious few upgrades and tried to charge £149.95 for it. Unfortunately for them, a lot of these models did not sell, and many retailers have since reduced the price of these to as little as £79.50 in some cases. Now, why would any retailer need to reduce the price of a high quality and detailed model by almost 50% in order to get them to sell? Well, here's why. The model's junk. The instructions are incompetent, and they include a deliciously ironic misspelling of the word cleverly. Not that clever then, are we, lads? The model itself is almost entirely made of plastic and it weighs just 156 grams, which is shockingly poor given the full price of these. That's almost 30% lighter than the Hornby version. So you think you're buying a modern and newfangled J94 when you buy one of these? No, it's actually much lighter and therefore weaker than the existing model on the market. The detail is generally very poor too, with visible screws, plastic buffers, terrible looking whistles and safety valves which are just moulded, a static cab vent which you cannot open, visible moulding lines across the top of the model, and very badly painted cab detail which is also very simple. On the plus side, the build quality and livery application were fine, but that's mainly because of how simple this model is. Mechanically, the DCC fitting solution isn't as clever as EFE Rail thinks it is, and that's because the smokebox door was glued on, either with stray paint or stray glue, and then rather than having the socket on a pull-out drawer, as with Dapol's much better designs, you have to go fishing around inside the loco with pliers to get the socket out. While the axles are fitted into bearings, they're permanently fixed into the chassis, which makes cleaning and lubricating very difficult, if not impossible. And because those bearings also act as the pickups and you're not able to clean them, the performance of the loco degrades over time, and that's what we saw with my older DJM version of this model, which really struggles to maintain continuity over the pointwork now. Disassembly of the rest of the model is a nightmare too, but removing the body reveals one of the puniest motors I've ever seen with no flywheel in sight. And quite what such a cheap looking component is doing in such an expensive model is completely beyond me. So to sum it up, it's a cheaply produced lightweight loco with limited detail and a horrible mechanism sold at extortionate prices. This led to my score of 5.56 out of 10 and a grade of E. The fact that these didn't sell and had to be massively discounted is arguably punishment enough, but I do want to inflict punishments of my own to each loco in today's video, and so for the J94 from EFE Rail, I sentence it to an endorsement by Dickie Dixon.
So we bought these locomotives from Kernow, who had a bit of a lucky warehouse find, which basically means they had a load of unsold stock which they just found. A bit of a magical phenomenon here in our industry. But anyway, these are available on the Martin Martinson website now at a discounted price of £145, which is £5 off the full price, so it's a bit of a bargain. And I've got a friend whose friend's nephew's friend actually bought one of these, and they said that these are absolutely adequate. If you take a close look, you'll notice that these models have even been painted, and apparently, when Martin tested a few, a couple of them actually worked, which is a bit of a bonus, isn't it? But of course, if you do have any problems with your order, which is unlikely, don't hesitate to give us a call. and you'll find our offices closed, all of our staff moved to Switzerland with no identities, and an answering machine message recorded in Spanish. Is that all right, Donald? Right then.
The next crime against locomotive kind was not committed recently. I just reviewed the model recently. The loco was actually from Bachmann's 2011 catalogue, although that's not long enough ago to excuse how utterly shoddy it is. The loco is this, the Bachmann Collet class, and the model actually dates back to 1978 when it was first released under the Mainline Railways brand. But here we see it back in the range 33 years later, with precious little in the way of upgrades or improvements, and in fact there are a couple of downgrades. For instance, it's 30% lighter due to the all-plastic body construction and the much lighter chassis. It also has this hideous seam line going right across the top of the loco, making it look like a cheap kid's toy. It also has no sprung buffers, no painted cab detail, no depiction of the valve gear between the frames, no separate reverser rod, this is a moulded piece, no separate smokebox door handle, this is also just a moulded piece. It's got chunky overscale looking lamp brackets and a flat looking finish on a fairly boring livery. Now you might say that perhaps models just didn't have those high spec features back in 2011, but of course they did. I have tons of models produced before 2011 with sprung buffers, painted cabs, loads of separately fitted detail and a much better quality build than this. Even by 2011 standards, this model was shocking. Now I'd love to say that Bachmann are much better than that these days and that they don't recycle old models as blatantly as they did back then, but of course they still do. A classic example of that is the 2MT that I reviewed recently, and it looks absolutely awful because of the age of the tooling. Now, one thing that Bachmann did change on the latest Collet release was the chassis, which is good news because the old mainline chassis was a split chassis design and the axles had a tendency to fail. But I don't believe that Bachmann updated the chassis because of this. I honestly think the only reason Bachmann decided to upgrade this is because the old chassis just wouldn't have sold very well because of the lack of DCC socket. I say that because the mechanism design here is absolutely terrible. It is one of the laziest, worst mechanisms I've ever seen, and here's why. There's no wired connection to the tender in any way, which means there's no pickup support from the tender, and it also means that they've sacrificed some of the loco's weight by making space for the DCC decoder in the loco, instead of doing the smart thing and putting it in the tender, where there's loads of space for a DCC socket. The drawbar is also terrible. It's really fiddly to couple and it's too easy to accidentally uncouple. There are no separate bearing on the axles, there's a bare bones chassis with no lighting or other features, just a basic motor which I suspect is 3-pole with no flywheel fitted to it. But at least it has a DCC socket now, so the gullible ants will buy it. As a result of this lousy mechanism, the crawl sucks because the motor's got no torque at the slow speeds. Having said that, at the higher speeds the performance is acceptable, which is this model's only redeeming feature. So to sum it up, the Bachmann Collet has laughably poor detail, a frankly insulting mechanism, and less than adequate performance, leading to my score of 5.39 out of 10, or a grade of E. As a punishment, it will now be subject to an incredibly merciless rant. The world's a mess. Nobody can afford anything anymore. The hobby's dying, the industry's on its knees, and we've got leechers like Bachmann pumping out ancient models at extortionate prices. I've walked through fields of festering cowpats and seen better representations of a Collet class than this. I've built better models than this by accident at the age of 1.5 when I used to play with clay. I can't even use that flaming thing as a paperweight because it's so damn light. So instead, it's become an object of ridicule, a symbol of everything wrong in the world, and an example of every single one of God's 7 deadly sins. Gluttony. It allows the suits at Bachmann to grow fatter. Greed. That one speaks for itself. Sorrow. That greets anybody that opens the box. Wrath. That follows shortly afterwards. Laziness. That was Bachmann when they dredged this thing out of the canals of history and failed to update it properly. Vanity. Well, for that we look at the box. Authentically detailed model. Get over yourselves, Backman, it is what it looks like, a turd on wheels. And finally, lust. Well, you got me. I can't think of any object less likely to bring about lust, unless it's a lust for destruction. And now, for the love of God, let's move on. So the models that we've seen so far today have been physically horrible, but I don't mind the fact that they exist. As well as being physically horrible, the model in third place is also conceptually horrible, and the fact that it exists is one of the worst model railway travesties of all time. It's made by the mighty Bradford Exchange, who peddle absolute excrement while marketing it to look much better than it really is. Since it's Christmas time, take a look at this Christmas tree that they offer. It looks absolutely gorgeous in the photos, doesn't it? But here's a YouTube video showing the actual product. It looks like the tree that your blind grandfather cobbled together in the 1950s, and it's been dragged in and out of the attic backwards every year since. Well, the same is true of the Queen Elizabeth II Royal Remembrance Express collection, which claims to be a celebration of our late Queen, who was British. And yet all the vehicles in the set are clearly American. Stupid. The entire set costs over £300, but I just bought the loco and the tender, which cost me just over £200 with postage. And I cannot express what an utter rip-off this is at that price. The actual value of this to me is less than 1/10 of that, and here's why. While the photos make the paintwork look great, in reality it consists of cheap and pixelated transfers which look more like stickers in places. There's awful lining that's much thicker than the banding, there's glue marks that ruin the finish, and moulding marks where the parts have been cut from the sprues. The sprues? You mean this was injection moulded and not handcrafted? Why would I think this was handcrafted and hand-painted? Because they said it was. Look, there it is, handcrafted and hand-painted. They're in black and white. This is a complete lie. The parts are clearly made by injection moulding machines, and this paintwork is not hand-painted. It's clearly printed digitally too. At best, this model will be hand-assembled, but that's not the same as handcrafted, so I guess we really are in scam territory now. The front bogie and also the tender wheels are all plastic, and they don't even match in colour, which is really shoddy, so this is a toy-grade model, and my favourite feature is the static plastic valve gear, which does not move. I've never seen anything quite so terrible in a £300 train set. Of course, we've also got the huge plastic coin glued to the front of the loco, and these laughably shoddy resin coins that fit into the loco tender instead of the coal, which I think is a hidden metaphor for burning money, which is what anybody that bought this set has effectively done. I also got some track which was included free with issue 2, and this was so bad that it was literally unusable. It caused the engine to derail immediately and in multiple places, but this doesn't matter that much anyway because the mechanism is poo. There are no pickups in the tender because the wheels are all plastic, and there are no proper bearings on the driving axles either, they just sit into square bearings. The chassis is very feature-free with nothing but a motor with no flywheel fitted to it and a 21-pin DCC socket on board, the latter being quite a surprise. Incredibly though, the performance away from the terrible track it came with is absolutely fine, which is a small silver lining on the very darkest of clouds. That said, it still came out with a score of 5.36 out of 10 and a grade of E, which means that some punishment is in order. Now, unlike the Bradford Exchange, the leading brand of model railway products is great at producing models as advertised, and so here comes an advert for this product as though it was made by them. This model is more than just a train, it's a treasure. And that's because every model is plated with pure gold, making it priceless. Every detail has been handcrafted and lovingly glued in place, and our luxurious glue is worth £100 a drop, so we've given you extra. King Charles himself has spent an entire night with each model in this range, so that every model contains his essence and his odour free of charge. I really enjoyed designing this model, and I can honestly say that I gave it some thought. We've really gone above and beyond to make sure that this model is as detailed, accurate and excellent in every way. And everything I've just said is a complete lie. See? Honesty. The second worst train was made by Lionel, and it was this thing, the Army Hospital train set. I'm sure you'll remember it well. And I had high hopes for this set because the box promised prototypical details as well as a sound system. I also had high expectations for this set because it cost a fortune. At its full price it was £325, but I paid a heavily discounted £183, and this is what I got for my money. It's an extremely lightweight and plastic loco, and even with the tender it only weighs in at 531 grams. Not a lot for a loco of this size. Despite the boxer's claims, the detail is utterly cringeworthy, with chunky moulded handrails, none of these separately fitted, same with all of the pipework, just part of the moulding. Parts of the paint job are completely missing, such as the builder's plate details, and the physical detailing has been drastically simplified too, with none of that promised detail around the pilot area, and even the front knuckle coupler is fake and unrealistic. There's no proper cab detail, with none of it painted, and the tender is adorned with some revolting crust, and I'm still not sure what that is, so I ain't touching it. Parts of the mechanism are a letdown too. Many of the driving wheels have no flanges, despite this train set having wide radius curves, and some of the drivers have traction tyres to make up for the lack of loco weight. The power supply failed the moment I plugged it in, and yes, it was rated for my local voltage and frequency. The track was so intermittent and faulty that the loco couldn't even complete a full lap without stopping dead. But by far the worst feature of this loco is the sound system. It has an incredibly high-tech sound system with this assembly on the tender which detects the loco's speed and synchronises the sound. But as the loco speeds up, instead of synchronising the sound properly, the chip just plays the same monotonous chuffing sound faster and faster as the loco speeds up, and by the time it reaches even a moderate speed, it just sounds like a machine gun.
I think I figured it out, folks. Right. I haven't figured it out. Keep stopping.
That sound system has to be the biggest waste of money ever. All of those components to produce that synchronized sound, and it sounds worse than a cheap Hornby TTS decoder from 2016. Absolutely shocking. So this loco came out with a score of 5.09 out of 10 and a grade of E, the lowest I can give because this is utterly unforgivable. Therefore, some sort of punishment is in order. This loco is about to ruin an intimate movie scene. Oh Mary, I love you. I do hate to say goodbye.
Oh John, must you go? I don't think I could bear to live without you.
Yes, Mary, the troops need their leader. But there's something I have to tell you. Something that will bring you hope.
What is it, John? What could possibly comfort me now?
Well, Mary, it's something I did a long time ago. Something that I just told you now.
What?
I've hidden $1 million. You can use it to...
John! No!
So here we are with the final model, the very worst model train of 2023. And this one was so appalling that I couldn't take it seriously, and in fact I had to reshoot parts of the review because I kept laughing. It is this, the awful Bachmann PCC streetcar. Now, right off the bat, I have to say this one is quite fun to run, at least when it's working properly. And that's because it has a couple of really fun features. The sounds are great, and it also has this arcing effect on the pole, which is just wonderful. But with a full price of £175, you'd expect a little bit more than just some play value. Detail-wise, there's almost nothing to speak of. Almost all of the detail looks coarse, but none of it is separately fitted. It's also really badly painted. Even given the heavily discounted price I paid, I was shocked by how bad the painting is here. But it's the interior that is by far the worst aspect of this model. Instead of having one, you've just got opaque windows with the silhouettes of passengers badly painted onto them. None of them have any detail though, except for the driver, who looks like a demon from a parallel universe. Mechanically though, this thing is seriously cheap and nasty for a £175 model. It has plastic axles with the wheels forced into them, causing them to split, and only half of the model's wheels are actually driven. Obviously, the axles have no separate bearings on them, and inside we have a cheap plastic chassis, not die-cast, which has a tiny motor with an even tinier flywheel stuffed into one end of the motor bogie, which is not a very professional looking design in my opinion. It also has no DCC socket. All of the DCC circuitry is hardwired to the loco, so there's no customizability here. Now, during my review, this thing did run pretty well in the end, but I did pick up on one or two reliability issues where the thing would cut out on the points. Now though, a few weeks after the review, I've just gone to test this thing and it's even worse. It just inches forwards and then cuts out. And the thing about this is, when it does cut out, the decoder resets and it forgets which functions were enabled, so it's almost impossible to keep the lights and the sound switched on, which is just ridiculous. In the end, this came out with my lowest score of the year, which was 4.93 out of 10 and a grade of E. Though it did have some cool features, the lack of detail, the bad paintwork, the insulting mechanism, the unreliable performance and the baffling decoder design make this model almost useless. And as a punishment, it's going to appear in a near-miss compilation.
Ooh.
Stop. I have a problem with the phrase near miss. Near miss suggests that you nearly missed something, but if you nearly missed, then you didn't miss. When we say near miss, what we actually mean is near hit. But that was supposed to be a near miss compilation, not a near hit compilation. And so, let's bust the useless bugger. This is for everyone who's ever been ripped off in this hobby. 3, 2, 1. Oh, I nearly missed. So there you have it then folks, those were the very worst model trains of 2023. Now clearly every model has good and bad points, but in this video I left out all of the good points for your entertainment because obviously this is all about the worst model trains. But if you'd like to learn more about any of the models in this video, if you'd like to learn about the good as well as the bad, I have included links in the description to each of the respective reviews. These are just my opinions. Do you think any of these models are actually not as bad as I think? Please do let me know in the comments. I think last year I said that some of the worst model trains were actually not that bad, but that is very much not true of this year's bunch. I think all of these are utterly terrible, and that makes for quite a delicious video, doesn't it? So I hope you enjoyed this video. Do stay tuned to the channel because very soon I'll be producing a video about the best model trains of 2023, and I've already taken a look at the top 5 and they really are a treat, and that video will be with you soon. For now though, those were the worst model trains of 2023. Thank you so much for watching and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers everybody.